Hey, what's going on guys? How is everybody doing? If you've ever wondered what it would be like if Fischl put on a pair of pants, summoned flowers instead of a talking raven, and spoke strangely in a different way, well, I guess Albedo is the hero you've been looking for. Albedo is a devastating Geo character with a proclivity for AoE damage. We'll be talking about the stats you should be prioritizing, how to build your artifact sets, what weapons he'll get the most performance from, and what talents you should focus on. We'll be judging these from a free-to-play level all the way up to an endgame primary hero. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. I mentioned before that Albedo is a Geo Fischl, and that's not far from the truth. Both summon an element from their skill that stays on the field and continually does damage over a long period of time while generating energy at a random rate. But Fischl has the upside of having an element that can generate 3 different reactions, 5 if we include Swirl and Crystallize, reactions that Geo just doesn't have access to. So what is it that pushes Albedo over the top into 5-star territory? Well, frankly, it's his raw numbers. Albedo has extremely high potential when looking at his scaling, which helps to make up for the lack of reactions he has access to. Now, that isn't to say that he's useless in terms of reactions. Building Albedo as a Petro support can be extremely deadly, especially paired with a monotype duo or even an added Viridescent Veneer support unit. From my testing so far, I do believe that Albedo is the best Geo support we've gotten so far, and the Geo character that best stands on his own without needing to be considered as a Geo battery or for his Geo resonance. When looking into Albedo's kit, there are 2 main builds that will be discussed, and I'll give my thoughts as to which I prefer and the uses of both. These are, of course, building him for defense or building him for attack. Albedo's skill creates a Solar Isotoma, which will deal AoE Geo damage upon creation and create a zone which you can see on the ground. While damaging enemies inside the circle every 2 seconds, a Transient Blossom will be generated that will deal AoE Geo damage. The damage of these blossoms will scale off of Albedo's defense. He can also use the blossom created initially as an elevator, which can be handy for exploration and getting to hard-to-reach areas, but can be more of a nuisance than an aid in the middle of combat. Keep in mind that there are places that he won't be able to place the skill, like the Oceanid boss, or places his elevator won't work if it becomes blocked. The Isotoma is also a construct, so it will resonate with abilities like Zhongli's skill. His burst will create a giant surge of crystals to emerge from the ground and deal massive AoE Geo damage, as well as create 7 fatal blossoms that will also deal AoE Geo damage in random spots within range, as long as you have a Solar Isotoma on the battlefield. All the damage here scales with Albedo's attack. This attack is easily spammable as it only requires a minimal 40 energy. It is important to note that the damage from his burst will not proc any blossom triggers from his skill. And at Ascension 4, it will increase your party's elemental mastery by 125, further boosting your reaction damage. So, if Albedo has a split kit in terms of how you should invest, either defense or attack, what is the right answer? Taking the raw numbers out of the equation, I do think that it comes down to playstyle. Do you want your Albedo to be a more passive member of your party, every 30 seconds bringing him out to drop another Isotoma and just leave it to ride the passive damage? Or do you want to switch him in, get bigger damage when activating his skill, and constantly churning him in for big burst damage? Are you finding yourself in more one-on-one fights like against world bosses, or more AoE situations like in Abyss? If the former of these 2 situations feel like they apply to you, build him for defense. If it's the latter 2, build him for attack. It will also depend on your resources and how much you can invest into his weapon. With very little investment, his defense build will be far superior, because we won't need to be concerned with getting his base attack high to benefit from any percentage boosts. However, if you already have a 4 or 5-star weapon built to max, you will see a potential damage boost in moving into attack. Moving on to talents, the priority will also be dependent on your playstyle and how you prefer to play Albedo. I would still invest in both his skill and burst, but if a decision needs to be made about upgrading one over the other, your preferred playstyle will tell you which talent is more important to level. Luckily, Albedo doesn't need any investment in his basic attack, as he doesn't perform very well in a carry role and his basic attacks overall hit pretty weak. So there's no shame in ignoring his basics completely and just using him for his Geo damage. For the purposes of this guide moving forward, we'll be looking at a defensive build, as that's what I feel most players will gravitate towards and will give more players the best performance. When wishing for Constellations, it's all about that C2. Constellation 2 will increase the damage of Albedo's burst by stacking Fatal Reckoning up to 4 times, which will be generated via damage from a Transient Blossom. For each stack of Fatal Reckoning, Albedo's burst will increase in damage by 30%. This can be especially devastating given Albedo's high base defense. Constellation 1 will provide some additional energy recharge, but it's negligible compared to just getting some energy recharge substats. Constellation 4 is more of a meme than anything and certainly not worth pulling for. Constellation 3 and 4 are our normal skill and burst talent level increases, which can provide significant improvement, but serve more as a stepping stone to his 6th constellation, which will increase the active hero's damage by 17% as long as they are protected by a shield created by Crystallize. This is a powerful constellation, especially when paired with heroes who already have insanely high damage output, as this is a damage percent multiplier and will be added after all other calculations. But it might just cost you an arm and a leg to get there. Albedo's artifact builds are fairly straightforward and self-explanatory, as he falls into 2 categories as support, either a burst support or a Petra support. As a burst support, he'll be much more flexible and be able to fit on pretty much any team. A 2-piece set of Archaic Petra and a 2-piece set of Noblesse Oblige will provide a nice boost to all of his geo damage, as well as adding a little extra kick to his burst. Now, you could substitute the Gambler set over Noblesse Oblige for extra damage on his E. However, because the Gambler set maxes out at 4 stars, it will result in a loss of stats over the potential 5-star pieces that Noblesse offers. So, because of this, if you're looking to use Gamblers, use them in the Flower and Feather slots to make the stat loss negligible. The other build, being a Petra support, will be a full 4-piece set of Archaic Petra. This build will focus more on being a utility support to your other main heroes as opposed to a damage machine. This build will be highly optimal if you use a heavy elemental monotype carry sub-DPS team, such as Diluc and Bennett, or a Keqing and Fischl. As with his artifact sets, his stat builds are also very self-explanatory. His timepiece should fall under the damage type that you're choosing to focus on, either defense or attack. Energy recharge is not necessary here, as his burst only costs 40 energy and will build very quickly. His cup should be geo damage, as all of the damage he'll be outputting will be geo. And finally, your circlet should be a crit stat, whichever you're more in need of based on your other substats. If you don't know how to determine what your optimal crit stats are, you can check out my guide, link will be in the top right. Albedo's best in slot weapon lends a lot to him being a surprisingly cheap hero to build. For defensive focus builds, Harbinger of Dawn will be his best in slot weapon. Because we're focused on his passive skill damage, we can more or less ignore the base damage table of his weapon, as that does not play any part in defensive scaling. So the most important aspects of his weapon will be the substat and passive. Harbinger of Dawn can be incredibly potent due to its crit damage substat and increase in crit rate from the passive. The downside to this weapon though is that the crit rate boost will only take effect if Albedo stays above 90% health. So, make sure to protect him, especially if using him as a Petra support, as he will need to be the one to collect the crystal to proc his 4-piece bonus. If you're looking to build him for attack, Summit Shaper will be his best in slot. And it's the strongest sword with an attack substat, which will further push the damage of his burst and initial skill activation. Alternative to both these weapons will be Black Sword, Black Cliff Longsword, and Festering Desire. Black Sword and Black Cliff Longsword will boost either your crit rate or crit damage, so choosing one or the other may come down to what artifacts you have available to you so that you don't skew too heavily in favor of one stat. Festering Desire is the new completely free weapon in 1.2 and will passively increase both the damage and crit rate of your skill. The energy recharge isn't exactly necessary, but will help aid in being able to spam your bursts. In conclusion, Albedo is an incredibly versatile support unit. While he doesn't have any benefits when it comes to reacting with your other heroes, he is an incredibly potent damage dealer and will help pump out both AoE and single target damage on the cheap. Hopefully you guys have found this guide useful and it will help you in building your own Albedo. If you liked what you saw and want to see more content from me, head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazzy, or you can support me right here on YouTube by clicking the red subscribe button, like the video if you liked it, and hitting the notification bell, that way you never miss a video. But guys, that's all I have for today. Hope that you did enjoy. See you guys all in the next video. Peace.